Okay, so we're starting the beginning of Parshas Lecha in Torah Ohr, which is unique because this mimer actually has absolutely no Dibur HaMaschal. In fact, the closest thing we get to Dibur HaMaschal is the line at the beginning of the Parsha that says that this first mimer, and generally the entire Parsha, is speaking about the idea of Lechacha, Ve'elech Masav, how it goes from below to above, above to below, and how we progress from merely the level of Hashem Hanira until we connect to Hashem itself. Okay. Mimer starts off speaking that Avram's name, before it became Avraham, is Avram. The word Avram can be broken down to two parts, Av and Ram. Av is associated with the level of Chachma, Ram shows how it's lofty, which shows that the name Avram is referring to the level of Seichel Nela Mikol Ra'ayin, a level of understanding which is concealed from all forms of connection and understanding. However, the goal is Lecha, that this level of Avram should be able to be brought down into the Seir Shalshalos. It should be able to go down through all the levels, and the goal is that it should reach even levels that are Biyah. The Ganei Denalya and Tachta and the Nevraim, that should be able to receive this. However, the only way to reveal Avram Avinu, the only way to reveal Avram is through the Tzimtzumim, which Tzimtzum is Yitzchak. Avram corresponds to Chesed typically. Yitzchak corresponds to Gvura. That we need the darkness of Yitzchak, the Vayir Vayibayku. We need both the idea of darkness in order for there to be light, for there to be a new beginning. To have Yem Echa, to be able to bring down into the world the level of Echa, that there should be the Bital Yesh, that the Yesh Nivra should be able to feel Hashem's existence. How do we see this from the word Echad? Because we know generally there's a teaching that said about Shema, that what's the significance? Why do we say Hashem Echad, not Hashem Yachad? Why do we say Hashem is one, not Hashem is the only entity? Because Echad shows how even if there are other created beings, you can still reach a level of Bittul. So in order to have this Gili of Avram, of the Seichel Nela Mikol Ra'ayin, to be able to be brought down into Seir Shalshalos, this has to happen through the mitzvah of Mila. Mitzvah of Mila, to remove the Arla, the physical covering, which in a spiritual sense refers to Klippas Nega, which covers over the Gilei of Kedusha, that there should be no room for Yunika to be brought down into Klippa. Therefore, it says specifically after Avram Avinu gets the Mizmilah that he's called Av Hamayin Gayim, the father of a multitude of nations, which makes no sense. What's the connection to Gayim to what happened to Avram Avinu? Simple explanation, that through the Bris Milah, it allowed him to have the ability to be brought down into and affecting Seir Shalshalos, because it says that what are tzaddikim compared to in front of the Shekhinah, like a candle in front of a torch, that they're bottled to the torch. Another Ma'amar Chazal, it says Gola Edaim. What was the whole point of going to Golas and Edaim? Was in Tesla Gerim, in order that we should have additional Gerim. Of course, that could mean in the literal sense that there should literally be more converts, but it could also mean in the spiritual sense that the Kaichais and the sparks of holiness that fell into Klippa should be uplifted. The food, the drink, could all be raised to Kedusha because of the Gilead Shekhinah. Through this, they could be joined into Kedusha like a candle to a torch. This is also the explanation in the pasuk at the beginning of the parsha. V'yemer Hashem al Avram, Hashem spoke to Avram, which is a level of Seichel Nela Mikol Ra'ayin. You say Lech Lecha, they should go down into Birur. Going into Seir Shalshalos, connecting to the Shema, which is the Shem HaBittul, Shem HaBirur, sorry. It has to go Lech Lecha, down and down, further and further, to go down from Avram all the way until Haaretz Asher Areka, until the land, which is level of Malchus. What's the significance of Asher Areka? That Areka, not necessarily doesn't mean that I will show you what the land is, rather I will reveal what you are, I will show what you truly are. You will become revealed through the mitzvah Milah. And that's also significance of, after the bris, him becoming Avraham. But based on this, it's a descent to go from Avram to Avraham. If we're saying that the Seichel Nela Mikol Ra'ayin is this very lofty level, and the whole point of the bris and all this sort of stuff is for him to be able to go down to a lower level, to be able to be brought down and say Shalshalos, that would mean that Avram is actually a higher name than Avraham, which seemingly the bris milah, the mitzvah connecting to Hashem, the name Avraham should be higher than Avram. So explains the Alter Rebbe on the bottom of Daf Yud Aleph of Torah Ohr in the second column of the beginning Parshas Lecha, second separate paragraph. The Alter Rebbe explains what the hey that's added in the name Avraham is referring to hey law. It says in the Zohar in regards to the pasuk Vava Levi what is the level of who? Who is the level of Atik? That this hey who is associated with the level of Atik, which is associated with the level of Bina, not Chachma. How do we see that? Because the pasuk Vava Levi who is referring to a Levi. A Levi is connected to the union of Grura. And if you would break up Seder Shalshalos, Grura has a closer association to Bina. Chesed has association with Chachma, Grura has association with Bina. So the letter Hey being added, which is associated with the word Who, shows on a level of Atik being connected to Avram. Specifically not Chachma. Why? Chachma is called Aden. In Aden, there's no room for the revelation of Atik because Atik is the source of Tainug. Tainug, which is higher than Chachma. Chachma itself is called to understand this, Chachma itself is called a Nikud, it's called a point. And it's limited. It's limited in the fact that it is Simsum, it itself cannot be brought down into Pratim, cannot be brought down into details, can't be revealed. Specifically through Bina, the Bina takes the inyan of the Nikuda, the point that is Chachma, and turns it into a Heichal, it turns it into a larger and broader structure that can be able to be brought down, as it says, Nikeva to say Gaver, that in a certain sense, the feminine aspects of Bina surround and build on the concept of Chachma, which the only way Bina is able to do this is because it's connected to the level of Atik. As it's known that the only way for things to be explained is through a better understanding. What does that mean? How are you able to make something lower through knowing it better? So we're going to have to give one of the most typical mashalim in Chassidus is the mashal, the analogy of a mashal itself, of an analogy itself. We say by Shlomo Melech, which we know is called the wisest of all men, period. It says that he was able to say 3,000 mashalim. What's the significance that Shlomo Melech was the wisest man, is able to say 3,000 mashalim? Seemingly anybody could give a mashal. That's not necessarily true. Because we see there's a lot of people who they learn something, they learn a concept, and they may understand the concept per se, but they can't explain it in different terms and different level. They're stuck to the core idea of what they're learning, of what they're saying. The only way you can really explain something on a simpler level to somebody else is, first of all, making sure you understand the point itself, how you're able to draw it down a different level, and how to find similarities and significance in lower levels. Which, to be able to pull this off, you need an even greater chachmam, that he should be able to reach even to lower levels. Shlomo Melech was at the point that he was able to do this 3,000 times. He was able to find a mashal to whose mashal to his mashal to his mashal. Specifically, and so this is a very, very good analogy for why specifically the higher levels are the only way for lower levels to be able to be reached. That Chachma, which is the point, you could say, is the thing itself. How do you draw it down to Bina? How do you draw it down into the explanation? To do this, you have to connect to even higher than Chachma. You have to connect to the level of Atik. In order to draw it out in the form of a Hey and to draw it out to the full point. And drawing in Oisias HaKabbalah, it says that each one of the letters of Hashem's name of Yud, then Hey, then Vav, then Hey, corresponds to a sphere. So the sphere that corresponds to Chachma is the letter Yud. The letter Yud has, if you look at the physical letter Yud, it's got a point on top and a point on the bottom. The point on the bottom shows on how the level of Chachma is drawn down into Bina. The point on top shows how the level of Chachma connects to the levels of Kesher, levels of Atik. And it says in Kabbalah that the lowest point, the point of Chachma going down and descending into Bina, is associated with the high point, the level of Kesher. Which is to say that Kesser itself is associated and ends up becoming the source of the ability for Bina to do its thing. So, through this, Avram Avinu, through this, Chachma was able to come down into lower levels, which the pasuk says, Vayelech Ma'asav Negev, that Avram Avinu was able to go down to the south. The south refers to the level of Chesed in spiritual terms. Beis El refers to the level of Malchus, which means he was going from above. Avram was able to go from all the way down into Malchus. And then through this, he's able to go from having to be stuck on a level of Hashem, nearer to a revelation of Hashem, to the Pnimis of Hashem, which is Hashem without any other terms involved. So understand this in Avodah, it says that Torah is called the strands of Chachma of above. That Torah, which is associated with physical things, is sourced in the level of the Hashem's Chachma Yena. Now we can't understand how it is. We can only understand it as it is enclosed in physical things. That what happens when you take the physical asteroid, for example, through this Chachma is enclosed within it, and it's as if you're holding on to Chachma Ilah. Now, to draw down Chachma Ilah into physical things is specifically through the light of Keser. Why? Because Torah itself, Torah itself is sourced in the level of Chachma. But the source of Torah mitzvahs comes from even higher. Comes to the level of Keser. As it says in Tanya, it's brought down in Tanya, for example, that the 613 mitzvahs plus the 7 rabbinic commandments correspond to add up to 620. 620 is the gematria of the word Keser, which is the levels higher than Chachma. Therefore, the revelation of the level of Chachma law, which is enclosed in your physical tefillin, in the Parsha of Kashli Kol Bechar, actually connects to a higher level of Chachma than is in its source. Because this level of Chachma, as it is enclosed in your tefillin, is connected to the level of Keser. That's why physical mitzvahs are what cause the yichudim, what cause the lofty supernal unions. When you do tzedakah, that causes a aliyah in Gan Eden itself, that higher than Gan Eden even, the level higher than the levels of neshamas. That you turn from tzedakah, you turn from a dalid which is a lower level, to a hey, which is even a higher level. Therefore, we can now understand why the Torah doesn't mention before we see Avram Avinu going to Eretz Yisrael. We never hear anything about his hospitality and his charity work, which Lecha, he doesn't change overnight. This was his personality. His personality was the level of Chachma. Not Chachma, sorry. His personality was Chesed. His personality was kindness. You really think that he would go 75 years of his life without ever inviting a guest over? No. Why does the Torah only start telling us about his mitzvahs and his achnos zarchim after the fact? Because only then what did his mitzvahs actually have an effect over anything. But the thing is, the others were only able to prepare for the true connection of the physical to the spiritual, because we all know at this point that the physical and the spiritual really only started connecting by Matan Torah. So the Avos, including Avram Avinu, were only really there as a preparation for Matan Torah. That Avram brought down the level of Chesed, Yitzchak brought down the level of Gvura, Yaakov, who was the combination of Yitzchak and Avraham, was able to lead into the giving of the Torah. Which, this is the entire point of starting off the Torah with Chumash Bereshis. Why didn't we start it off with Achayish Hazeh? Why didn't we start it off with the actual mitzvahs? Why do we give this whole preamble of Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov, besides the fact that just good stories? What's the point? The point is that they are the foundation of all of Yiddishkeit, and they were the preparation for Torah mitzvahs. However, based on this, we have to understand, why did we still need Galus Mitzrayim? We have to go through Galus Mitzrayim in order to receive the Torah. It says, they still have to work. Then we have the merit of the Aves. And also, how were all these Yichudim done by Avram Avinu before the Bris Milah? Because the Bris Milah was only given when he was 99. But we still know he already did hospitality from even earlier age, from at least for the age of 75. To explain this, we bring down the Gemara in the Mishnah in Kedushin that says that Avram Avinu kept the entire Torah even before it was given, which the makes no sense, because how was he able to put on tefillin if Mitzias Mitzrayim, which is what's written in our tefillin, never happened? So the explanation, which is brought in many places in Chassidus, is that there are two aspects of every single mitzvah. There's the pnimius, there's the kavanah, and the ruchnistic effect, and then there's the chitzonius, which is the physical ma'aseh mitzvah. Avram Avinu's mitzvahs were only done on the pnimius. They're only done in the spiritual sense. And Vayemer Havaye, Hashem speaking to Avram Avinu was a revelation of the Ein Sof, and only the aspect of pnimius, though. It was only able to connect to the ruchnius. He wasn't able to reveal it in the physical parchment itself. The only way for something like that to happen, that the physical parchment itself should become holy, has to be through Kolas Mitzrayim, Vaymarus Chayim, Avedei Kasha, that their lives, the Yidden's lives in Mitzrayim physically were worse. With all the hard work, that specifically allowed them to reveal higher than Seder Shalshalos, and that way they were able to bring down even into Shalshalos itself the Kedusha into the physical material, the parchments and the writing. They had to be able to connect to a level that in which Ma'ala and Manta, Ruchnius and Gashmias were equal. That there was no differentiation, and it's not impossible to say that something Ruchnius can be enclosed in something Gashmias. Which means that the Vayimarus Chayim that happened in Mitzrayim was able to connect to the levels of Arith, the Makifin, the ones that the levels of Asiyah are higher connected than the levels of Atzios. But Avram Avinu was only able to connect to the level of Pnimius. Therefore, he wasn't able to reveal it in his Ma'aseh Mitzvahs Begashmias in an outward sense. The only way he was able to do his Ma'aseh Mitzvahs was with Pnimius. What? When he turns 99 years old, he was given as a gift the Mitzvah Milah that affected the physical Gashmias in order for him to have Yitzchak. Yitzchak had to be born for there to be Yaakov. Yaakov had to be born for there to be Matan Torah. And then we were able to do actual physical mitzvahs. Therefore, Avram Avinu couldn't get the Torah because he had Yishmael. He was the source of a Nesinas Kayach. He was able to give room to negative things. Only after Avram got circumcised. He gave birth to Yitzchak after he was circumcised. Then Yaakov was able to be born. And then he was able to connect to this level of Igulim, the level of Makiv, which is higher than everything else. Through this, continuing on the bottom of Yid Aleph Amud Daled, the fourth column, which means the second column on the second side of Daf Yid Aleph, in the second paragraph on that column, this is the explanation of the pasuk. The word V'loyanachnu means to him is our nation. The light to him is our nation, but spelled with an aleph, as in our nation is not him, to him. What's the point of switching around the spelling? Why is it low with an aleph if it's supposed to mean to him? Explains Alter Rebbe that aleph shows a level of keser. It's part of the reason why the Torah start with aleph. But this level, why does it, V'lai anachnu is, we are Hashem's nation only through the level of aleph, the level of keser. Since we're trying to connect to something that's higher than shalshalos, the way to bring it down is through higher than shalshalos. Therefore, when the Torah was given and commanded to mitzvah, the first mitzvah starts off with an aleph anechi connecting to the level of keser. In order for us to fulfill the mitzvahs, begashmias, and to accomplish the yichudim, specifically that's through our mitzvahs, it's impossible unless there's a gilui of keser level of aleph. This also explains why Avram Avinu had to be 75 years old when he left Haran. Haran, it's a very random age, 75. But it can be understood in the spiritual sense. Because Avram, we've already established, is associated with the level of Chachma, level of Seichel. In order for your sake, in a physical person, for example's sake, you have an intellectual understanding, you need to do something. But there's sometimes there could be a divide between what you intellectually understand and what you emotionally feel. That is what's called in Chassidus the garin that's physically represented by the throat, but it just means the chokehold. It means the choking point that could prevent you from having your intellect connecting to your emotions. Avram Avinu had a similar thing, Baruchnius. And he was seichel, and he needed to be brought down into the lower levels, into the spiritual, into the midos, into malchus, but he couldn't do it until he turned 75. What's the significance of 75? There's the 7 midos times 10, which shows on a shleimus a completion of each of the 7 midos, plus 5, which is the hey chasadim. Then he was able to leave charin. Charin is associated with the word garin, throat. And only then was he able to come down into Gashmis. This also explains why after he came to Eretz Yisrael did he separate himself from light. While he was still in Haran, he had light as this little tag along. But once he came to Eretz Yisrael, him and light split off. Why? It's explained that the same way in Kabbalah there's an idea that Esav is associated with Yitzchak, that Esav's Gvura could in a certain sense be closer, more similar to Yitzchak, that Esav is a byproduct of Yitzchak's Gvura. The same applies to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu had and it gave space for the entity of light. What's the entity of light? Light is the gematria of Ma, which is the name of Bittel, which is also associated with Chachma and Bina. However, that's Chachma and Bina of Klippa. That's why he's not called Ma. His name is Light. Light means curse. And light was so attached to Avram before the bris, before the bir, before he came to Eretz Yisrael. It was almost like the sediment that gets mixed into pure ore, that unless you do a proper procedure, it's one and the same thing. And light was the source of klipa to the point that Amoin and Mayav, which Mayav is the level of Chachma of klipa, Amoin is the level of Bina of klipa. That Mayav, of is the level of Chachma, and Amoin, if you switch the letters around, is Noyam, pleasant, which we associate Bina with pleasantness because it's a revelation of Atik, as we established at the beginning of the Maimer. That can only come through light. But after the Birur, light broke away from Avram. To explain the end of the Pasuk, Avram made his tents until Shechem, which is the levels of Chesed and Gvura, Elon Meira, which levels of Tiferes, because all them shachas of Avraham, the point was, he was bringing down 2 malchos from Seichel and Nelam Mikol Ryan. That's why Avraham Avinu was able to ask Hashem for Lu Yishmol Yichal Lefanecha, that Yishmol should be able to exist, period. Because after he reached the level, Avraham Avinu reached the level of Avraham, that he had the hay added to his name, he was able to draw down to the levels of Malchus, and the bris happened, he was able to draw up the sparks of everything, like a torch in front of a torch in front of a raging fire, that everything should become batal to Hashem. As we know, that's when he was able to have the nefesh Shah, he was able to make these souls. And Sarah, who was originally with a Yud, which shows on Tzimtzum, afterwards was when she gave birth with Yitzchak, her name was changed to Sarah with a Hay, which shows on Chava, growth. And this growth will allow Avram Avinu to go from Hashem Anira, that Hashem revealed himself, to Hashem Stam without any additional titles. And this is the concept of Avram Avinu and the point of his journeys throughout Eretz Yisrael. The point was the Gilui of Atik in Bina, that Seichel Nel Mikol Ra'ayin should be able to be brought down, but by being brought down, it's not limiting it, rather it's allowing it to connect to even higher levels that wasn't able to connect to previously.